Welcome to another Through the Bible. Today we're doing 2 Corinthians.
No, it's 2 Corinthians.
2 Corinthians.
Isn't that what Donald Trump did one day?
Yeah, and everyone made fun of him for it, but it's actually okay to say it that way.
I was yes, the Dyson did that.
Why is it 2 Corinthians, not 4 Corinthians? Because 1 and 3 are missing. And also not canonical and not part of the Bible. We talked about this. Yeah. We talked about how interesting it would be if we found one of these letters and if we would include it in the Bible or not. According to canon rules, no, because it had to have been accepted by the early church at that time and spread and distributed as scripture. So that would X it out, I think.
Just fun little stories.
So this is the sequel. Who likes sequels? Like you movie you love, and then the sequel comes out, and you're just like, yes! And then they're usually disappointments. Except for the Two Towers.
This one's gone a disappointment.
The Two Towers of the Lord of the Rings is actually quite possibly the best name.
I thought you were talking about New York.
Oh. Like 9/11?
That's the Twin Towers.
Twin
That's the Twin Towers.
Yeah.
We're talking
By
about
the way, the Lord of the Rings movies, they're just the different books. They're not actually.
Exactly. But the kind of sequels to the books. Books can have sequels too. Anyway, so Paul writes another letter. What do we know about 1 Corinthians? Like, what do we remember from 1 Corinthians?
He addresses sins.
He addresses their sin issues. They have a lot of sexual immorality. They live in a very a sexually perverse society, which they have a lot of problems, which has also infiltrated the church. What else did they struggle with? Yeah, so many parallels to 1 Corinthians and growing up in our world. Yes. Divisions. That's another one we struggle with. Look how many churches we have in Linden, and a lot of them get along, but there was a point where most of these churches came about because of divisions. You know, like First Reformed, they were like, hey, we want to build a new building. And then a bunch of people in First Reformed were like, we don't want to build a new building. So the people that wanted to build a new building went across the street and built a new building and started their own church. That's Faith Reformed. Literally.
Or First Christian Reformed Church needed to have services in English, but it was in Dutch. Am I doing the right church?
Actually, third CRC split off of First Reformed because they wanted to do services
But
in
I think
English,
that was a bit more
not
positive.
Dutch.
It's like we need to have another congregation, and that's the way the churches used to
No,
exist.
it was a disagreement
Was it
over we should do services in Englishes.
English.
We should do services in Dutch. Anyway, divisions are very common. It's not just a today problem. It was a back then problem. What were they divided on? Do you remember?
Food issues.
Food issues, yes. There, and then another thing, leaders. What leaders were they divided over? Some wanted to follow Paul's teaching. Some wanted to follow Apollos' teaching. Some wanted to follow Peter's teaching.
Amen.
That's what Paul said. That's right, Henry. Follow Jesus. Yeah. Don't make it so much about one man.
But
Yes.
then I always get kind of mad when Paul says, Paul, imitate me as I imitate Christ. I was like, bro, actually, we should just imitate Christ.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah, I mean, these are people who hadn't met Christ, so having a person example is also helpful. Like, we can find people today, like, hey, look at what Delane does. Look at what your mom does. Look at your grandpa. Like, find examples in real life to help you follow Jesus, but you don't elevate them to the level of Jesus, right? You observe them and learn from them. All right, so we've got, once again, this is going to be a lot similar to 1 Corinthians. Paul is writing again an epistle or a letter. Now, this one is quite different in tone. It's an extremely personal letter, and almost autobiographical. What is an autobiography? Yes.
Like someone's own story of their own life.
Yes, and they're writing it themselves, right? So a biography is a story about someone's life. Autobiography is writing about themselves. So Paul is writing a lot about himself and who he is, and we're going to learn that reason in a minute. The primary audience is the church in Corinth. Has Paul visited this church?
No. Oh, dang it.
Paul planted this church. He spent a year and a half there, if you remember from last week, unlike Jessica.
Jessica.
That was the church in Rome
I'm
who had it
sorry.
visited, right?
Learn from
This-
not me.
This is so that, this is deeply personal. Paul knows these people. He spent a lot of time with these people. Also, Paul has visited again in between 1 Corinthians and 2 Corinthians. He's been by again. Remember, he wrote another letter also. He refers to this other letter as, what is it called? Oh, he made another visit, the painful visit in 2:1. So there has been, Paul's letter, first letter, did not fix all their problems.
What?
Like,
Sin
not-
still continued?
not at all. And actually, more division was caused. 1 Corinthians was delivered. Many people in the church rejected that letter, rejected Paul, and was like, "What? No, that's dumb." And so it didn't just like, "Oh, we got this letter and it solved all our problems." Not at all. And then actually, new false teachers arose. So this letter deals a lot with these false teachers who have risen up in the Corinthian church, First Corinthians church. That's like First Baptist. And led them more astray. So, it's sad. So Paul made another visit, the painful visit. He also had sent another letter. Remember we read about it last time in verse chapter 1, 3, and 4. A letter filled with anguish and tears. And he's writing this final letter that we know of. To affirm his love and commitment to them. So some of the problems have been dealt with because of his visit and because of his other letter, but he's still dealing with the problems. He's affirming his love to them and affirming his own character. So his own character is getting attacked by the false teachers. People are saying, Paul's no good, don't listen to Paul, listen to us instead. Paul doesn't know what he's talking about. And
Paul's not even here.
Paul's not even here. His character's getting attacked. What do you think? What do you guys think? Any guesses on some things they don't like about Paul? Maybe
He's not staying with them.
he's not with them. Okay, yeah, the false teachers are there, right? What else? He's an absent teacher. Okay.
He tells them to not do sexually immoral
He
things.
tells them to not do things they like
hey,
to do.
that's sin.
Yeah, he tells them to not sin. They look down on him for some reasons. Any guesses on why they might look down
Oh,
on
I have a
him?
guess, but let kids go first.
He's poor.
He's poor. Do you remember what he did when he was in Corinth as a job?
Tent maker.
Tent maker. He made tents. I looked it up. I said canvas. No, at this time it was most likely animal skin. Jessica, you were right.
Remember that? He just was right.
Yeah, she was right. Animal skin tents was what they would have had back then. So, but stitching and tanning hides, that kind of thing. They looked down on him because he was a working man, and maybe these false teachers had more money and asked them for money. And Paul literally says in this letter, I never asked you guys for money, and they never sent him money to fund his missionary journey. So it's this weird. There's this weird thing about money with them. But they looked down on Paul because he was poor and he did this manual labor. Also, Paul speaks to, it sounds like they thought he was an unimpressive speaker. And that actually comes up in a few times. Paul maybe wasn't the most eloquent speaker. Paul was extremely educated. He had an incredible mind and brain, but we've never heard him speak. We've just seen his writing. Maybe he was a better writer than he was speaker. Maybe in person he wasn't dynamic or exciting to listen to. And other teachers were. So in comparison, Paul was lower down as a teacher, which is interesting. Paul, being a very high-level Pharisee, how much of the Bible do you think we expect that he would have memorized?
The Old Testament.
The whole Old Testament, yeah, which is all that the Bible that existed at the time. They didn't have as much, get to carry around a little Bible like this. They would memorize the Old Testament. If you stuck through in rabbi school, which all little boys started out on, and then at some point dropped out to do their father's trade, not a shameful thing, but a few boys would keep going all the way through and end up memorizing the whole Bible. All their schoolwork and stuff was in the Bible, and it was working with the Bible and memorizing the Bible. It's how they learned to read and write. It was right in the Bible. So,
what's your question?
What does this say right after ministry? To affirm Paul's ministry,
defend his authority as an apostle.
Defend his authority as
There's
an
the
apostle.
light on the wall, actually small, and in
Okay.
terrible color.
And you're far away.
Yeah.
Sorry. So, also, there's something else. Yeah. Oh, because he suffered. Like, Paul did, because he didn't have, like, an easy life that they all wanted to follow. They were just like, who is this guy? Like, God must not be with him because he's having all these problems. He's always getting arrested and, like, so they would look at him. We can do this too. This is interesting. We can look at people and, like, how much money they have, how good they look, how eloquently they speak, how engaging of a speaker that they are, and judge them on those things, not on the content of their words. So this happens today too. Like in our church, Delane is not the most exciting preacher, right? He's not like yelling and getting excited and like Delane himself says, if you have a little baby, you can download his sermons and help the baby to fall asleep. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of true.
If you know who Mr. Rogers is, we say Delane sounds like Mr. Rogers too. But Delane is incredibly experienced and educated and loves the Lord and has years of faithful service to the Lord. He teaches the Bible faithfully. He submits to the Bible faithfully. He's not the most dynamic, engaging speaker, but he loves the Lord and teaches faithfully, and we love him for that. But some people could come to hear him speak and think, he's kind of boring, right? So maybe this is similar to their experience with Paul and why they're rejecting him, and why these false teachers are coming in with, Lambos and gold chains, and they're like, dude, I want to be like that guy. And he's like exciting and yelling and jumping around and stuff. I don't know what it was like, but there was a comparison here that Paul refers to of their rejection of him. This was written just a couple years probably after 1 Corinthians 55 to 57 AD, near the end of Paul's third missionary journey now. I think the other one was written on his second missionary journey?
The other one was written near the end of Paul's third missionary journey.
Okay, so he's still on his third journey, and he's writing it. This time he's in Macedonia.
Yeah, last time he was in Ephesus.
Right, so he wrote a letter, third missionary journey. Yeah, you're right. He didn't go to Corinth on his third missionary journey. There's that trip that we refers to. I'm not totally sure. He's up here in Macedonia, which is modern day Turkey, is where he wrote this letter from. Main characters. We have Paul, Timothy, Titus, and false teachers. So Paul deals with these false teachers and what they've been taught. The purpose of 2 Corinthians, why did he write another letter? Was to affirm Paul's ministry, right? Paul's ministry was getting discredited. It needed to be affirmed. He needed to defend his authority as an apostle, as one sent by Jesus to plant churches and to teach the people, and to refute the false teachers in Corinth. So that's the purpose of his writing of his letter. Okay, to save time, I did the exact same timeline here, main events for you to write down, as in the Bible Project. Sometimes I grab it from another spot and they're slightly different. But we keep running out of time. So I want you to write down the timeline as you watch the video. And Jessica will put it up on board, and that will help you follow, and then we'll have more time for afterwards. Sound good? Okay.
Slide 20 is the key verse.
Wait, one more thing about Jesus. Paul refers to meeting with Jesus.
Oh, yeah.
That's interesting because usually, who are the apostles? What do we call a capital A apostle?
It's someone that had been with Jesus. That's
And
how
sent by Jesus.
Right. So
It means
anyone
sent
can
one.
be his disciple, but there's no more apostles because you're no longer.
So
been with
Paul
Jesus.
was not one of the disciples. How is he an apostle?
Because he spent time with Jesus.
How did he spend time with Jesus?
I don't know.
On the
Oh,
road
right,
to
when
Damascus.
Okay.
he appeared to them, made him blind.
Yes. So that's the first time Jesus calls him in person, through a vision that other people heard too. It's not just a personal vision even. They didn't see it, but they could hear it. And also in that there's like a long time of Paul before he goes in active ministry in Antioch, and Paul refers to those times as like communing with Jesus and learning from Jesus, that Jesus envisions like taught him things. And so that's what is, he's a sent one, he's been sent by Jesus. So Paul is, the 13th apostle, I guess. I don't know, minus 1 plus 1 plus 1.
Minus 2.
14? Judas, then Matthias, then Paul. I don't know.
Yeah, 13.
Yeah, 14.
No, 13.
14
Plus 2. Yes.
plus 2. Are you going to take away Judas?
Yeah.
Okay. 13. So there's another reference to Jesus as well. I wanted to talk about that apostleship for Paul. Our key verse. 5:20. We are therefore Christ's ambassadors, as though God were making his appeal through us. We implore you on Christ's behalf, be reconciled to God. This is kind of that role we're talking about, like who are we, are we supposed to just follow a person? Or are we supposed to, follow Christ? But we should be Christ's ambassadors. What does an ambassador do? We still have this role of ambassadors. They're usually ambassador to the president of Argentina, and they come by and they drive the car with the little flags on the front, and they can park wherever they want. Have you ever heard of ambassadors before from other countries? Yeah. When I was in Moldova, I saw the ambassador of the United States who was coming to help with Ukraine border, the problem with the border. We saw her, and her name, she has a superhero name. Her name was Mary Powers.
Woo! You sure it wasn't
Yeah.
Mary Poppins. Isn't that Mary Poppins? That's
That's
copyright power. That makes copyright power.
Anyway, she was the ambassador of the United States. So she was there representing the United States and what the United States would be doing to help Ukraine with the refugee crisis and the people who are leaving Ukraine going into Moldova, the country next door where we were. And we went to this huge gathering, there was tents and stuff, and then she was there walking to see how people were coming out of Ukraine and going on buses to go to Romania or other parts of Europe and stuff, and she was there representing the U.S. So what our job here, that's a great representation of our job here. We're to be ambassadors for who?
Christ.
For Christ. We're on this earth. Jesus is not on this earth in physical form anymore, but we are on this earth, indwelt with his Spirit, doing his work, speaking for him, representing him. So we are to be Christ's ambassadors, which is an awesome way to look at what Christians should be doing and how they should act. And were the Corinthians being good ambassadors of Christ? No. They were the money thing. I think money is a really good way to see where people's hearts are at, where they put their money and their time, right? Where they put their resources. You can see where people's hearts are at. It doesn't mean everything. Just as someone has a nice car, it only doesn't mean they love God, right?
The verse
Or a nice
says,
house.
where your treasure is, there your heart will be also.
Right.
So
So
whatever's
where
important
are
to
they
you.
spending their resources gives you an indication of where their hearts are at. Are, what are they prioritizing? It's really important. All right. I love this verse, this section in chapter 4. And in our time, I chose our timeless truth out of it. Treasure is what? In what?
Not in riches of. I don't know.
No.
Look up chapter 4. 1 Corinthians. 2 Corinthians, sorry.
Yeah, tricky. 2 Corinthians.
2 Corinthians 4 what?
You sure it's not Second Chronicles?
What verse?
Well, it's the
You
heading.
just scan it and see if you can figure it out. What does the heading say?
Treasure in God's
Resurrection.
life.
Okay. So the clay is the same word.
But we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that.
Jars of
So we
clay.
got the parts. This one is jars. Yep.
Yeah.
What is? It's kind of a tricky one. I chose that one. Treasure is.
Where do we?
Don't give it away, Brian. Don't give it away.
I can't.
Power.
I tried to give a
Treasure is
hint.
Power in jars of clay. Treasure is love gathered in jars of clay. No.
Fragile.
Fragile and jars of clay. No. Should we just tell them?
Treasure is found in jars of clay.
Oh.
Okay, so this may not make sense to you because we don't have clay jars anymore.
You should just
But is a clay jar a very fancy vessel, like a treasure chest?
No.
It's a simple vessel, right? It's like a Tupperware, right? It's literally like Tupperware. That's the greatest analogy. They would store regular things in jars of clay, okay? So this verse is talking about, this is 4:7. We now have this light shining in our hearts, but we are ourselves like fragile clay jars containing this great treasure. This makes it clear that our great power is from God, not from ourselves. So we are jars of clay, very simple, breakable, fragile, not impressive vessels, but we hold great treasure in ourselves, which is the Spirit of Christ. And we should not be like, look how awesome of a clay jar I am, and try to impress people with our clay jarness, our regularness, but we should show people Christ. The treasure that's inside of us should be what people love about us, not the fancy vessel that we are, but what's inside of us, the treasure inside of us, which is Christ. We represent Him and try to show off Him, not ourselves. So that's what Paul is making an illustration of, because they've been led astray by these false teachers who are impressive.
These super apostles.
And Paul is basically saying, I can outdo all these guys. You don't even know. Like we'll have a showdown of Bible knowledge. I will wipe them out. I'll wipe the floor with them. But it's not about me, and it shouldn't be about you. It's about Christ. That's his big point to them.
And he shines in our weaknesses.
Don't-
That's what Paul
yeah.
was talking about.
Through weakness. We should boast in our weaknesses, he says. Why do we boast in our weaknesses? That sounds so counterproductive.
To show the power of Jesus and how He's changed us.
Yes. When we are weak, he is strong, right? God chooses regular, everyday
Jars of clay.
people who struggle, who do things wrong, because in those people, we can see God doing great things. In impressive, important people, we see them like, wow, they're awesome. God doesn't shine through as much, right? But when God uses regular, weak people and does great things through them, he shines, he gets
So
the
if you
glory.
feel like a regular weak person,
You should be
you're
happy.
blessed. Let God shine in you.
Yeah. God, just look through the Bible, like Gideon. Who else are weak kind of like average people? Moses didn't even know how to talk. And
No,
he's like,
he did know how to talk. He just didn't believe in himself. He's like, I can't even do
he
it.
said he has a stutter.
I'm like, I need some help. And God's like, fine, your brother Aaron.
Yeah. Anyway, God, all through the scripture, God uses regular, everyday, weak, normal people. It's awesome. All right, that's the book of 2 Corinthians.
Also, there's a really cool rock band